Hello and welcome back to Booklust. I'm your host, Nancy Pearl. My guest today is Brad Kraft, longtime bookseller at University Bookstore here in Seattle. Brad, it's so nice to have you on the show. Thank you for coming.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm delighted to have been asked.
Brad, when I say longtime bookseller, how long actually have you been working at University Bookstore?
I've been here, this will be my 22nd year.
I see a lot of changes in the publishing world. What do you see?
Well, I mean, not to be frivolous, but suddenly they've all fallen in love with dyeing the page edges of everything and putting patterns and fish and starbursts. I, I don't understand it myself, but yeah, that's the big thing. But oh, it's changed enormously in my. I mean, I've been selling books since 1986, I think. So yeah, long time. And consolidation was the first thing that happened.
Right.
There are so many people that are just one person now, or two people, or five people. Companies, I should say, rather than people, but it feels that way. The disappearance of representation on the ground to independent bookstores. There are fewer and fewer reps in the world. And just the way books are sold to us and that we sell them to the public have changed quite a bit. The device that we're speaking on right now is responsible for the majority of the changes, both in publishing and bookselling.
In what way? What do you?
Well, because people buy them off the computer now, orders are placed on the computer now. I don't get to call Tennessee while looking at microfiche and talk to nice Southern ladies to ask for books with naughty titles, which was one of the delights of my early career. For anyone who doesn't know, Ingram used to have a warehouse that you call on the telephone to order books
Right.
from. And the
Yes.
bookstore I was working in those days was in San Francisco. So often I had to request titles that would make a church lady blush.
I remember those because when I was at the bookstore in Tulsa, I was the person who used to call Ingram, and I loved those Southern accents of those very nice women, and you would read off a list of titles that you ordered for the bookstore, and yeah, those were the days, huh? Now it's all done.
The conversation consisted of them saying the title back to you and then go ahead. So it'd be like 5 copies of The Boys of Vaseline Alley. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Give me a sweet Tennessee accent. So yeah.
right. Love
Yeah, I
it.
missed that. But yeah, there have been lots of changes. But you know, the other part of that is that for all the changes that I've experienced and that are ongoing, I mean, even the institution where I work is changing as we speak. Um, the relationship between books and readers has not changed in my experience, and therefore the relationship I have to those readers hasn't really changed in that period.
So I'm pretty clear on what role librarians have in the whole interchange between readers and books and you as the librarian. And I think that booksellers have that same closeness, develop that same closeness with their return customers.
It's commercial cousin is what we what we are. Yeah, because we're selling the books. We're not just handing them to people. But
Right.
and so that means that we have to. I mean, I know a lot of librarians, and I know that they spend a lot of their time accommodating the tastes of other people that they might not share. And that's something we very much have in common. It isn't my place to tell you that you shouldn't read that book. It's to get that book for you, whatever that book happens to be. And then if you're lucky, and it happens with some frequency still, you get to talk about books that you like with people who may like them as well. And that's the pleasure of the thing.
I mean, I think also that one of the pleasures is that kind of excitement of finding a book for that customer or for that library user that's a book that they might not know about, but that you feel like, oh, that's a book for you.
Yeah. Well, and there's just I mean, and there are lots of ways to do that. It isn't all just personal interactions with individual people. Displays are a way that we get to express ourselves, and they can reflect our current circumstances. One of our most popular tables right now is dystopias, but they needn't be, just gifts for mother. They can all be on pretty much any topic. And the nice part is that this is Asian Pacific Islander American Heritage Month. So we have not one, but four separate displays up for that. One, books of cinema and entertainment and music, a fiction table, a table of memoir, and a food table.
I think I would head to the food table, actually.
Just a way for us to bring books to the attention of people that they might not have seen otherwise. Some of our most popular displays in recent days have been Women in Translation, which I've just left up for 2 months because it continues to sell wonderful books that we have single slim copies of that would otherwise disappear into the shelves.
One of the displays that I've loved at University Bookstore recently is a display of books where there are disagreements about whether the book is good or not. And good, I've always believed that a good book is a book that you like. That's all.
It's absolutely the right definition.
So this is where people take, like, well-reviewed books, what we would say 5-star books, 5-star reviews, and say, I hate this book, and then give like a one-sentence reason for why they hate it.
Yeah, I made the signage for it and contributed selections, but it wasn't my idea. It was one of my younger coworkers. And staff recommendation cards are common to any bookstore, in which you write up why you think people should be reading this title. And we have a staff favorite selection. Every bookstore does usually. But this time, somebody else said, well, why don't we ever write up the books that we don't like? And so then they started doing it. And it became enormously popular, may I say, not only with the staff, but with customers. And the best part about it is that these are opinions that we do not generally express in a retail environment. We don't tell somebody that we don't particularly approve of Giselle Bundchen's cookbook, in which she poses attractively with jars of beans. If somebody wants to buy that from me for $50, I'm happy to sell it to them. But this was an opportunity for us. And there's a level of engagement with customers as a result of, I think, the honesty of that. And then plus they get to argue with us. That's the most fun.
Right.
We have
right.
books where somebody likes it, somebody doesn't like it, and then you can just hear the umbrage from across the room, which is delightful.
Yes. One of the big changes that I've noticed is that we're seeing a lot more horror novels coming out.
Horror novels of a caliber that I'm a child of the 70s mostly. So I was reading all of Stephen King and Peter Straub and all those old American masters, bless them. And so I was there for sort of the pulp mass market era of horror, where every week there was a new, Flowers in the Attic sort of thing. And it's fascinating to watch the enormous diversity of writers that are now working in a genre like that. So I just read Buffalo Hunter Hunter, for instance, which is a brilliant, spoiler alert, vampire novel. It's all right. He used desanguination about 20 pages in case you're wondering. So that was your first clue that there might be vampires afoot. But he writes these brilliant books with a Native American perspective and grounded in what feels like, I'm not qualified to say it, but it feels like very well-researched history, And a lot of the sort of elevation of genre has very much happened in my lifetime. There are people who are writing romance novels that are reviewed in the New York Times. That just simply was not a possibility when I was younger. And science fiction and fantasy have conquered the culture.
Right. And also reviewed in the New York Times, and horror novels in the New York Times. So
There's been a lot of that. And also there's a whole genre of publishing that simply did not exist when I began. There were children's books. Now, librarians, as I understand it, had these categories before they came to bookstores, but bookstores are a little slower to catch up with. But I didn't know what middle grade was a decade ago. That was very much a librarian's terminology. And now it's something that's been adopted pretty universally in the book business too, that you organize books based on young people's books, based on their readership. And also that YA, young adult, does not mean high school kids. It means, 12 through apparently 48. Based on,
Or at least 48.
based on their
Right,
readership.
right,
And
right.
that's a mental adjustment for somebody like me. I grew up, kids' books were what you read when you were a kid, and you waited eagerly to have access to the adult portion of the library. Um, I think I
Yeah,
was 10 when I tried to take home Don Quixote, and the librarian objected because there was a prostitute in it. But I'd seen
yeah.
Mr. Magoo on TV, so. Oh,
In my library in Detroit, you had to be 13 or in the ninth grade to be able to, it was an old, like Carnegie library, and you had to walk past, the children's room was on one side and the adult and teen books were on the other. And to walk across that space was like you had come of age and now the whole world was yours. But I think, Brad, and I wonder what you think about this. Sometimes I think that all of this emphasis on what this emphasis on genre, what it does is, it it makes it. See, my feeling would be that we should arrange books in a much kind of bigger philosophically bigger category, because there are, for example, fantasy novels that I know people who love historical fiction would love those fantasy novels. And I'm thinking particularly of the novels of Guy Gavriel Kay, which are fantasy historical fiction. I mean, really historical fiction with a kind of elastic realism, where he stretches the boundaries. But you can't get to them. And it's not a natural movement from the novel section or the fiction section to the fantasy section. And I think that does readers a disservice.
well, part of it is a repercussion, an unforeseen consequence, I think. By enabling people to, by telling people consistently for at least two generations now that whatever they read is right, that whatever choice they make is right for them, and that there isn't that it isn't my place or your place or anybody's place to tell them that what they read is bad or that there are better books than what they read. One of the things that does is, in my experience, is quite often it slots people into whatever genre they adopt. And it makes it twice as hard, in a way, to come out of it, because there's nobody that ever says at any point, apparently, in their reading lives, if you like uh, a science fiction or fantasy writer, there are writers who are considered literary writers who also write historically. I mean, one of the things I have on the pile right there, and now I will butcher this poor lady's name, Vera Mutashiva. She is writing about Ottoman Turks, okay? And she's writing about this character, Sem, who's a real historical person. And it's a novel told from his perspective and perspective of other people. And it's this big, beautiful, bold thing with a bisexual lead and with the sudden conflagration of so many different cultures, because the Ottoman Empire was this huge thing. And one of my first thoughts when I started reading the book was there were so many people who could enjoy this, who would not be, her style is not opaque, and the only thing it lacks is dragons.
Right. Yeah, totally.
That I wish I could
Totally.
give books to, but the
Right.
books I want to give them don't have dragons, and therefore,
Right.
you know.
And I think that the solution in many a good solution to that particular issue of grouping books together from different genres is displays. You could do a display of everything but a dragon or something like that. That would.
Allows people to discover things that for instance, the book Women in Translation, it's a very simple premise. But what it does is it puts covers in front of people's eyes. And if the cover catches their eye, it also tells you that it's a perfectly legitimate thing if you like, say, Japanese cozy cat in a coffee shop novels, that there are 100 other possibilities. And if you put them cheek by jowl, as you say, then somebody who does that and does that pretty much exclusively, they may pick up. Contemporary Japanese publishing in English seems to divide itself neatly into two boxes: the sort of cozy, delightful cat in a bookshop kind of thing, usually with a romantic element, or crazy people. And I love the crazy people books, where you have no idea where the story's going, you have no idea what they're going to do next, and a lot of those books would never be picked up by the people who read the other ones.
Right.
But if you put them all on a display, as you say, and jumble them up together, there's nobody telling them that they can't read that other book.
Right, right. And that they might pick it up, open it to the first page, and say, wow, what's going on here? This sounds great.
Yeah, yeah. And then there's also the aspect of it that does trouble me a bit, which is that at a certain point in life, I'm not interested in coming of age. It happened so long ago to me that I am no longer particularly moved by the protagonist who is discovering life. And so there are writers like Sigrid Nunez, for instance, whom I love, who I desperately want to press into the hands of adult people, because I want them to see that not every protagonist needs to be 16 years old and discovering for the first time what love is. I want a protagonist not necessarily even my age. I want somebody in their 30s at the end of their first marriage. I want all this experience that has nothing to do necessarily with my life.
Right.
One of the reasons why I think I'm drawn more to female writers than I am usually to men is because I'm guaranteed that there's a different experience just by the fact of sex and gender. And in an age where gender, for instance, is very much a factor in a lot of people's reading and a curiosity, there are so many opportunities to read on that subject, around that subject, and through that subject without reading just about that subject.
I know you have a book club that you lead, and it's a big book club.
Now, Nancy, you have to use the proper name. It's Brad's Big Fat Book Club, because I had to argue to include the word fat. It took some convincing. But I mean, it was a reference not only to my waistline, but to the fact that they're weighty and daunting objects, you know? And it started pretty much during the pandemic because I needed something that I could do through devices like this. And then it proved popular. And we've done a lot of classics. Our very first book was The Count of Monte Cristo. And so we've crossed a lot of genres over the years. In fact, a number of things in the stack are from that. Olga Tokarczuk, the winner of the Nobel Prize, we did her gigantic The Books of Jacob, which is a historical novel set in the time of Hasidim. We just did The Family Muscat by Isaac Bashevis Singer. We've done Anna Karenina.
And I know you're doing one of my favorite books, Iris Murdoch's The Book and the Brotherhood, right? That's the one you're doing?
Yeah, it's the sort of the current selection is The Books and the Brotherhood. And one of the reasons I picked it is because I've wanted to do an Iris for a long time, and I couldn't remember reading that one.
Mm-hmm.
You know, which is automatically a pleasure.
I sort of went on an Iris Murdoch kick in my 30s, and I remember as I was going through them all, I kept regretting the fact that I would never have enough time to reread them, because you know, when you're looking for gorgeous writing and complicated characters, Iris Murdoch is somebody.
Well, I mean, I just literally started that, and because I used to be a used book dealer, I can't write in books. So one of the things that I've adopted, of course, is Post-it notes and things. And I don't know if you can see this, but there are already, 200 pages in, which is when I made myself stop. because we
Yeah.
do a book over the course of 3 months. And but there are probably a dozen post-it notes in here to mark just for the most part, what I'm marking are just things that she said that were so beautiful and quotable. Um, it is possible for a girl to have too long a neck, and lilies could be said to be on the border between the swan-like and the grotesque. Um, everything about Iris. And this, for me, is the deciding factor. It isn't genre, and it isn't age of the protect. The writing. For
Yeah.
me, I know it's an obvious and rather cliche thing to say, but people who write beautifully can write about nearly anything. And so we've covered a lot of historical ground in the book club, in part because I'm just drawn to people who do things on the page that are interesting and surprising and gorgeous.
I always want to run across a sentence and stop and say, oh my God, how did that person know to put those words together in that particular order?
Yeah, and it really doesn't have to be. There are great writers who do not write um, about beauty, but they write beautifully about ugly things. One that's going to be on my list at some point for the book club is this particular book by Haldor Laxness, another Nobel winner, who his most famous book I don't like. It's Sad People Raise Goats is what that book is.
Tell us the title. Tell us the title of that one, Brad.
Salka Valka is the name of it. And it's the story of a girl who shows up in a village with her mother because their money runs out. So they end up in this fishing village, even though they're trying to get to the one city in Iceland. And it's rough. It's such a rough book. It's from an earlier period in Laxness's. It's more didactically communist than a lot of the things that he wrote later. So that when you meet the minister, you know he's going to be a hypocrite. When you meet the store owner, you know he's going to be exploitive. All those sort of cliches of Soviet realism are here, but it's so funny. I mean, at points, it's almost vicious in its satire. Well, that's something new at 600 pages, which is kind of the minimum
Right.
for the book club.
Oh, so I was going to ask you, so that's the minimum?
Yeah, I think we've done maybe one book that was a bit shorter, and we've certainly done books that were longer. Like at some point, I have to do Vikram Seth's A Suitable Boy.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's a wonderful book.
I loved that book so much, and it's
Yeah.
available in
Yeah.
paperback again. And everything about it tells me that that's a story we need to fall into and not come up for air for a long time. And the other reason to do big books is because people are intimidated by them. They think, oh
Yeah.
God, I'll never have time to read, War and Peace or whatever.
Right.
And if you tell them you read it at your own pace, we've got 3 months. You can put it down and pick up other things. And one of the things that I do is that, it isn't just summarizing the action of the book. We're here to talk about two things. We're here to talk about the person who wrote it and the way they write. And then their ideas. Now, if you read fiction for ideas, that's like reading soup cans for philosophy. It's not really what writers, you know what I mean? It's not their job necessarily to convince you that the world is different than you believe. Some of them do, but it isn't really what their intent is. Their intent is to capture whatever it is they're writing and to do it better than anyone else could. And so when they do, then I love them. And some of the best writing in the world is in some of the longest books. And long books can be defined a lot of ways. I'm also reading these. I don't know if you've seen these, but it's kind of a thing, and they've done the first two, and the next two come out. It's part of a septology, which I wouldn't even have known that meant seven.
Right.
It's called On the Calculation of Volume. This is book number one, and it's by, I'm gonna mess that up too, Solveig Bailey, I guess is how you say it, translated by Barbara Havland. And it's sort of a woman, a bookseller, wakes up and it's the same day over and over and over again. And I'm already in volume 2, which is all that I have access to. But that's another way to read a long book.
Right. Right. Or we're going to have to stop in a minute, but I just wanted to put in a suggestion for a long book that's actually a quartet, and it's Paul Scott's The Raj Quartet.
Oh my God, they're so lovely.
It's so wonderful. So please do that. But
I'm easily convinced.
okay. Well, Brad, thank you so much for coming on the show today. And good luck with the book club. Good luck with keeping up with everything that's happening in the publishing world. And I'll see you soon.
See you soon. Love you.
Bye.